Elmo, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We have started the recording, just so everybody knows. We haven't, it's not time yet to start the meeting, but whatever you say will be out there for all to hear.
No, let the record reflect that that is incorrect.
Don't forget when the meeting starts to turn your mics on.
You can, it'll make you presenter.
I remember Schroeder saying
Your
no.
Honor, I object. Assumes evidence. Assumes fact. No, that's already gone.
Trying to find Colin
Go
here.
to the other kid.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm just typing. Right there.
Here.
Yeah.
Do
Here,
you
right
have,
here.
do you have mine already? You have mine already.
You should, well, yes. Colin not showing up
You can
here.
easily move that. And it's
Oh,
still,
very
yeah.
good. You haven't joined yet. Very good, okay.
Easily put out the wall over here. Those guys. Have to look at well, it's better if cameras are. The camera's on you. Sorry, brother. You're too close to the middle.
There we go.
Wow. Wait till it's active 5:30. We get going. I think we have done this.
Ask legal.
You can start now.
Start out. All right. And you know what? Planning and zoning commission for a special meeting this evening. No minutes to recognize the person tonight. If done, any conflict of interest or any contact registration.
Negative.
None. No public hearing action, no business, no department action. Tonight we are here for two amazing, they better be amazing presentation. Not impact fees, we'll start with legal counsel. Sure.
So you serve partly in the role as a development impact fee advisor. And you play a pretty pivotal role in the city's assessment and collection of development impact fees. So there's a lot of discussion about what they are, and there's some of it that's well-informed and some of it that's misinformed. So we've got to get kind of a baseline of knowledge so everybody's operating on the same page regarding what impact fees are and more importantly, what they aren't. And to see where your activity fits in the larger scheme and how they, what is asked of you and what you're being relied on to supply to the consultant who helps prepare a capital improvement plan and ultimately to the governing body that has to make a decision on that. So I will note that this presentation can cause drowsiness. You should not drive or operate motor vehicles while listening to it. But ask questions along the way. So I try to make it as interesting as I can, and I'll skip through the part I think I'm losing you. But if you have a question, please stop me and ask it. We could discuss.
Before you continue, I will just say evening, and that way everybody can speak.
So this is kind of an overview. Is there a way to embiggen this, or is that it? The PDF.
Did you just say embiggen?
He did say.
did.
bacon.
So
This guy's a
we're going
lawyer.
to talk about what they are, then what some things you need to think about as an impact fee advisory committee and as a P&Z commission. What kinds of growth is the city facing? What kinds of infrastructure does the city currently lack, or what is deficient in existing infrastructure? And we'll talk about the 4 areas in which we currently assess them. There's 2 other ones where you could, or maybe will. What kinds of infrastructure does the city need to support additional growth? And then it's important to know Because you have these two things that can come into play, and you've seen this as a P and Z commission, some of you in the past. There's that property that wishes to annex into the city and enlarge it. Then there's property that's already in the city, that's already platted. So it's important to know how many undeveloped but buildable or permitted as of right lots or areas there are in the city. That's a piece that yet or start filling into. Because that will come into play when the governing body and you folks have to decide what alternate sources of revenue are available and you might want to use instead of impact fees. And that's a required component in the capital improvement plan. So that's why it's important to know this stuff. Some stuff you're going to have to just deal with infrastructure wise and is impact fee eligible. But the newcomers, the additions to the city, there's all kinds of other revenue avenues. So, and then one you've been dealing with for quite a while, the city's current water and wastewater capacity, and then any stormwater concerns. So some cities don't have adequate stormwater. How much growth is going to occur via annexation, and then what kinds of infrastructure are population based and what kinds are household based. So those are some things to think about that all the time when you're dealing. So the Idaho Development Impact Fee, Idaho Code 678201, it's implemented as one of many tools. Growth pays its own way. You hear that? There's a number of ways growth pays its way that are independent and separate from this. This is limited that makes sure that the costs of preserving a current level of service are not borne solely by the existing residents. You can't shift the cost of improving deficiencies to the newcomers. So those are two things that are important. You gotta make sure that you're not shifting that burden to them. Subdivision code allows for mitigation of impact on subdivision approval, but then mandates compliance with the development impact fee code. In other words, you could conditionally approve a subdivision that's part of an annexation and get an annexation fee or some other mitigation that's outside the impact fee code. That's doable if you have an ordinance. But if you have a subdivision that's platted and inside the city limits, this is your avenue. There are some other ones you could still use, but this is the one for that. And so you have to follow all the procedures in the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act. Mandatory. It's heavily laden with specifically defined terms. So people toss terms around, service area, these things, what the term development, which we'll get into, and those are specifically defined. So the way you use them in conversation and the way you use them in policy discussions differs or can differ that which is contained in the statute or where it resides in our code. Very important to know. You have to go look at those definitions if they're there. Improperly adopted fees are null and void, and there's prior and current litigation that can highlight the strengths and weaknesses of using impact fees or what you have to do to make them work correctly. To avoid having them invalidated or having to refund them. So here's a menu of other sources of revenue. So I spoke briefly about annexation fees and annexation agreements. You can get into development agreements where the developer agrees to do things voluntarily. Voluntary exactions. If a developer really wants something and the city's reluctant to do it, they can come to you and volunteer to do something. Legal has to be very carefully supervising that to make sure that it's not involuntary or an illegal exaction or a taking. You can create a local improvement district. Those are a vehicle whereby it doesn't have anything to do with fiber optic. Just so you know, that was a vehicle. That's a mechanism. It's a mechanism to create improvements. They can be sidewalks, they can be water, they can be any number of things. Community infrastructure districts. I think Mayfield Townsite used that method. That's a really novel and interesting one where that district can sell bonds to finance the improvements. Those bond payments are then levied and assessed as a tax on the new property owners. So if you go up Highway 55, there's a sign for subdivision. It says no CID tax.
Mhm.
That's because that subdivision is being built where the builder absorbed the cost of the developments. The CID didn't. It's interesting because it's a really interesting statute, but it's pay me now or pay me later. Somebody has to pay for those improvements. So how they're spread out. The CID way is one way to do it. Judicial confirmation, lease purchase, certificates of participation are all ways that you can do something for revenue bonds in terms of getting a loan, and the judge confirms that it's an ordinary and necessary expense. So this is typically how improvements to water and wastewater systems are done, because they pledge the revenue of the system. So they don't require a vote, they just require a judge to certify that it's okay. And then the famous one that everybody loves so much, general obligation bonds that require 66 2/3% of the vote. Get that revenue. This again is to buy and pay for the capital improvements for infrastructure that's needed to support the new growth. So here's the definition. An impact fee is a payment of money imposed as a condition of development approval to pay for a proportionate share of the cost of system improvements needed to serve development. Here, magic. The definition of development. Any construction or installation of a building or structure, or change in the use of a building or structure, or any change in the use, character, or appearance of land which creates additional demand and need for public facilities. Subdivision of property that would permit any change in the use, character, or appearance of land, and development shall not include activities undertaken by a taxing district or school in the course of carrying out its statutory responsibilities, unless the ordinance expressly includes that. So a county or a school or another taxing district doesn't pay development impact fees because it's not what? Development. Right? So development impact fees are, previous slide. Condition of development approval. So if the thing being done isn't development, it's not due to have a fee. So keep that in mind. An example that I use a lot that came up when, right, I watched this occur. You have the dairy has a cement pad, and they go on that pad and they mix up food for the cows. Right, and they're tired of getting rained on, so they go apply for a building permit to put a roof over it. Did that act of putting that on create additional demand and need for public facilities? So the impact fee should have been zero because, right? But if you're just sitting there counting numbers and bullets and you're gonna be like, oh, I need $15,000. Then everyone's pulling their hair out going, we need to redefine industrial, we need to redefine that. No, you can just go look at the definition of development. And you can empower the folks at the counter to read that and understand it. And then if they need to ask legal or someone else. But if the thing isn't going to create additional demand for public facilities, not services, facilities. I need a new police station. I need a new fire station. I need a new park. I need a new street. Facilities, then it's not development. And it doesn't even come under the purview of the code. It needs a building permit. It needs a host of other things. But you're not going to need to build a new fire station because I put over a roof over the cement mix, the food mixing pad. I guess feed if you're a farm. System improvements, capital improvements to public facilities designed to provide service to a service area. Project improvements, there's site improvements and facilities to provide service for a particular development. Project is a particular development and identified parcel of land. The service unit is a standardized measure of consumption, use, generation, or discharge attributable to an individual unit of development. Cops per 1,000 people, acres of park per 1,000 people. Fire trucks or distance or time, and Colin needs to help me out here with this one because these get crazy. Streets, like what's the service unit for streets? Is it lane miles? Is it trip generation?
Yeah,
Is it-
vehicle trips, service units would be like for parks where generated, for that development. To people, service. That will generate 9 vehicle trips every day. Service.
If you're in a bigger city or a bigger county, you can identify, in our case, our service area is the city limits. County is the county. But larger cities that are more sophisticated, and this may even work in this city, for fire, you could have a service area, specific fire station, it serves this area. Now I'm gonna have a new service area. So these people would pay impact fees in this service area to support that. Jump in at any point if you have anything to add. Another definition that we run into, this is where you guys come in a lot. You're gonna be asked, you and Colin are gonna be working on this thing. This is called land use assumptions, a description of the service area, that's our fair city, and projections. What the crystal ball shows us for land uses, densities, intensities, and population in the service area over a 20-year period. And reading this carefully, you'll see that it's the word projection. So this means 20 years going forward from today here, next Thursday. So what can they be used for? Improvements with the useful life of 10 years or more by new construction or other action increase the service capacity of a public facility. So they can be used for water, wastewater. These are public facilities, according to the code. Water, wastewater, roads, streets, bridges, rights of way, traffic signals, stormwater collection, parks, open space, public safety facilities, law enforcement, fire stations, and apparatus, emergency medical and street lighting.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Is train crossings part of that?
Sure. Traffic signal, bridges, roads. I would think so.
Okay.
But you can
Would it
use
be
them-
though? Because it's not our right of way.
What's that?
Wouldn't be our right of way. It's the railroad's right of way.
The
That should be fine.
So the railroad has the right of way going this way, but if we have a street coming up to it and we want to improve that crossing, for example. So we also have a right to cross it based on an easement or some grant from the railroad.
Right, but then it's at their approval.
Right. Yeah, it's subject to their approval, but it's, if we can increase the service capacity. So if there's but 2 lanes crossing the track and we want to make it 4. Then that would be,
So,
if that is attributable to serve growth.
so let me give a hypothetical here. So we have West Fifth North crossing over there, right?
Yep.
We had a bunch of apartments just go in. We have a lot more traffic on there, and that crossing is in desperate need of upkeep
Yep.
of some kind. Would that then be susceptible to this?
But yeah, well, I mean, you know, we're talking legal speak here. So you said
Yeah.
upkeep, right? It's a upkeep need,
Yeah.
but it's 2 lanes.
If you want to improve it and increase the capacity, then that would
Yep.
be eligible, but the maintenance and the deficiency of it as it stands today would not be.
Right.
That would be on
Got it.
us.
Okay.
And luckily
Okay.
the folks, you know, you've been collecting for, they paid in street impact. Their proportionate share to the increase in capacity of the system. Dollars are.
Also,
I like it.
taking Fifth out to its full 80-foot platted width, where it's currently at, it's only at 60 feet or whatever its current width is, would also be eligible because you'd be adding the lanes to convey that traffic.
But capacity expanding that.
Yes.
I mean, if you're right, maybe the road is deteriorated, and so there's efficiencies there. But if the project is it's a 2-lane road, you're just structuring it to road, really haven't expanded the capacity that
Right.
you're addressing
Yeah.
efficiency.
Okay.
So, yeah, so here's what they can't be used for, and improvements to increase the level of service or to correct an existing service level. So you'll see this with the capital improvement plan that you're gonna start wrestling with, and that is, you have two columns, one is impact fee eligible and one is general fund payment. So you owe yourselves, you and our citizens owe ourselves improving the deficiency or correcting the deficiency or increasing the level of service in the existing area. And then if you want, the only way you can transmit that improved level of service to the newcomers and attribute it to them is if you make a match to that. So. Okay. Here's where you folks come in. The way you implement impact fees from the very beginning. And you're coming in, or you're coming into an existing one, but this is the way you're supposed to do it to start. But this shows what you're supposed to do. You identify projected growth rates and land use assumptions, the need for capital improvements to support growth, service levels, projects, service areas. You appoint an impact fee advisory committee, got that done. And then you start developing the capital improvement plan. That's done with department heads, city staff, engineering and planning professionals, and you folks, the impact fee advisory committee. You all work together to begin developing. In this case, you're going to be revising and fine tuning the existing capital improvement plan. You then review the proposed plan, the land use assumptions, the proposed improvements, and estimated start and completion dates. And then you prepare a draft CIP and fee schedules for various public facilities that you're going to build. And you prepare the code, the fee schedule, add public hearings, prepare an amendment to the comp plan and a fee resolution. You schedule public hearings. And we just went through that to amend ours to meet statutory. So identify the types of service units applicable to the service category, identify the existing level of service, identify capital improvements, new police station, identify the costs. So this is where a lot of the rub comes in. People will be like, oh, it shouldn't cost that much, or you're woefully under guessing how much it's going to cost to build that fire station or to build that police station. So figure out how much that's going to cost, predict the amount of growth that will trigger the need for that capital improvement. When I get to the 500th house, I'm going to need a new station. I'm going to need a new fire station. Figure out when those improvements will be needed based on the land use assumptions and projected growth rates. So identify the impact fee advisory committee, and here's your statutory charge. You assist in adopting the land use assumptions. You review the capital improvement plan. You monitor and review implementation of it, and you file periodic reports at least annually, and you report any perceived inequities in the capital improvement. And you advise the governmental entity of the need to update or revise the land use assumptions, the capital improvement plan, and the fees. So this is where we're doing it differently. In the past, this was kind of phone it in. I'm done. Can I go home now? This is where, as in your dual role as a planning and zoning, you're keeping your finger on the pulse of growth in the city, and you're able to monitor what those fees are, and you're able to tell, are we getting close? Are we keeping up? Is the growth rate exceeding what we predicted, or is it lower than what we predicted? And do we need to revise the start and finish dates of these capital projects, or change them and eliminate them altogether? And you can do that more frequently than once a year or once every 5 years. You can do it as the growth is occurring. So the statute calls for the impact fee advisory committee to work in coordination with the city's consultant in developing it. The government entity prepares a CIP, the cost of which can be paid by a surcharge. So in other words, you divide the cost of his input in this, you add that to the fee and divide it out by all service units. It has to be prepared by qualified professionals in fields related to finance, engineering, planning, and transportation. And the person preparing the plan, Colin, shall consult with the advisory committee. So consultative and coordinative roles. This is all the stuff that has to be in it, and I think I'll let Colin take this part when he, is this in your,
Yeah.
okay, all right. Definitive table, projected demand for system improvements, I didn't, there's a whole, I won't go through all of this. Has to be updated at least once every 5 years, requires adoption of a capital budget, requires public hearing and published notice, and requires amendment to the comp plan, adding the CIP as an element to the comprehensive plan. Fees shall not exceed a proportionate share of the cost of system improvements, so it's, we're gonna buy a pizza, there's this many slices, everybody takes a slice, you pay that much. It must be attributable to capacity demands generated by the new development. That fee has to be, and you have to show your work. The ordinance has to specify the point at which the fees are collected. It has to be adopted with notice and hearing. It has to allow a process for a developer to provide a written individual assessment of his fees. We've just done one of those. He should get a written certification of a fee schedule or an individual assessment. Shall provide a provision for credits if the person brings capital improvements along with him. Oh, here's a new police station I just built. You can, okay, we'll give you a credit. We won't charge you police impact fees. Prohibits the expenditure of funds except in accordance with, and we'll get to that in a minute. May exempt all or part of fees for affordable housing if the city makes up the difference with another revenue source. It has to provide for refunds, procedure for timely processing applications for determination, individual assessments. Has to have a provision for appeals, has to provide a description of the methodology and schedule for various land uses per unit of development, and a right of a developer to pay the proportionate share as full and complete payment of the project's proportionate share. So you can come in and be like, I'm gonna pay all of these. Here's one check instead of per house, if he wants. Here's where this is funny how it's kind of overlapping. The definition of development is already covered, but here it shall exempt the following activities: rebuilding the same amount of floor space, remodeling or repairing a structure which doesn't increase the number of service units, replacing a residential unit with another residential unit, temporary construction, adding typical accessory uses such as tennis courts or a clubhouse, or rough over a feed mixing station. So there's an interesting definition of extraordinary impacts, and those are things where a developer can be shown if you could show that a developer's thing that he's going to build creates a demand for service that you didn't anticipate, that isn't covered in the CIP, then it's outside this whole scheme, and it's like, you're an extraordinary impact, and this is gonna be your fee. So you have a way to get those ones that have a magnitude that wasn't contemplated. There's a definition of extraordinary impact, which I should include in here. But,
You give an example.
the code section, do you have the code?
It
I
could
do.
be like, like a minor league baseball. That's not gonna be specified in general land.
Okay, so it's like a special use or,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
okay,
It,
okay.
it's defined, reasonably determined by the governmental entity to result in the need for system improvements, the cost of which will significantly exceed the sum of the development fees to be generated. So this, I'm gonna get all these fees from you, but it's still not gonna be enough to build or buy okay, we're gonna get a fireworks factory. Well, now I need a super X10 fire truck or, you know what I
Sure.
mean?
It-
trips, right?
Right, where it's not a local trip, it's a regional trip or whatever, where you're getting trips from.
Or it results in the need for system improvements that are not identified in the capital improvement plan. So this is gonna, so I need an improvement that's not in here because your development's gonna require that system improvement. And what we didn't
You're
identify.
building out an interim plan.
Yeah.
That's above and beyond
Thank you.
development.
Okay, so after you, so here's where you guys are in this iterative loop. Okay, you've created it, you've set the fees. Now Brenda and company and the legal team have to administer them, and Paula has to keep track of them. So the money that comes in has to be earmarked and maintained in an interest bearing account. Accounting records shall be maintained for each category. Expenditures made only for system improvement. Here's our code for individual assessments, how we're going to do them. We have a code provision. So in implementing them, Brenda and company will process a building permit or development application. And they will say, yea and verily, your fee is this. And the guy comes back and says, oh, that's not right. You've miscalculated it. So then it comes to me and her, and then sometimes they'll phone this guy up. Is this guy's math right? What's going on here? So, in addition, the governmental entity must prepare an annual report describing the amount of all impact fees collected, appropriated, or spent. Describe the percentage of tax and revenues other than impact fees collected, appropriated, or spent for system improvements. They have to be expended within 8 years from the date they were collected on a first in, first out, except fees for wastewater within 20 years. If you don't expend them within 8 years, they have to be refunded unless you got a good excuse. You get 3 more years. So up to 11 years. If a property owner, refund shall be made if services available but never provided, building permit is denied or abandoned, government entity fails after collecting a fee, fails to appropriate and expend it. If the fee payer pays under protest and a subsequent review determines the fee exceeded the proportionate share, has to be made within 90 days and includes refund of interest at 1/2 the legal rate. City shall provide for administrative appeals by the developer or fee payer. He can pay under protest to preserve the right to appeal and be entitled to a refund. And then we have to provide a process for mediation by a qualified independent party. We also have 2 bonus provisions. If the city discovers an error in the CIP that results in assessment or payment of more than a proportionate share, the city shall either adjust the impact fee to collect no more than a proportionate share or discontinue the collection of any fees until the error is corrected by ordinance. So there's some heavy lifts in terms of demonstrating to the city that the CIP has an error that results in more than a proportionate share. And the burden would be on the person making that assertion. And we would meet and discuss it. And we have one of those in the hopper right now. We'll see how that turns out. If they're calculated and based on a mistake or representation, those should be recalculated. Amounts overpaid shall be refunded by the city within 30 days after acceptance of the recalculated amount. What else? And then we provide a means for collection. If somebody doesn't pay it, mostly it's, you don't get the building permit. If they build anyway, they can get charged with it. That's the end of it. My part. So one thing we should probably also do in terms of reporting is report adjustments that we've done and show the work on how we've done it. So these guys in Colin can be like, okay, now when we're going to review the CIP, note that this guy came in and maybe we need a more finely tuned methodology for calculating these fees. Or maybe he just has a hyper specific example and we'll let that system work. But just know that when fees are assessed and a fee payer complains about them or says that they're too high, there's 4 or 5 built-in backstops to get that correct. Then I guess the last thing, and this will be the second time you've heard me say it, you mustn't, and you can't, and it's not useful or worthwhile to compare impact fee totals. Because the variables that go into it are too numerous. They're too different. They're not alike. You can't, levels of service differ. Sizes of cities, lane miles differ, fire capacities differ. Ada County is the worst of all because their impact fee structure omits streets. Because Ada County Highway District assesses its own impact fees for streets. So you get this disjointed comparison. Not all categories are the same. Some cities only do impact fees for streets that are not in Ada County. And so saying that a per dwelling impact fee is comparable from city A to city B to city C is not useful. Unless you know all the other variables that go into it and their capital improvement plan and so on and so forth. So just, I used to hear that all the time. And I knew there was something wrong with it and I couldn't really put my finger on it until. That's all I have for now.
Any questions?
Not at this time.
All right. I'll take it away.
I told you, it's drowsiness.
And Jeff is already hit on it. What I had, so my intent today, we're just sort of kicking off the 26th update, 5-year update. Wanted to sort of go through some fundamentals, which Jeff did a brilliant job at, and I have a little bit more that I can just sort of share. And then, and answer any of those questions, so I just want to get everyone on the same page. I know a lot of you guys have been here for a while, but it's been 5 years. And then just sort of start presenting those growth projections. Those are sort of building blocks of that study. And want to make sure that there's an agreement, a consensus on those growth rates here before we move on to the capital plan. If any of the numbers in the growth projections change, the capital plans change, the fee amounts change, so it's just like this ripple effect that if we don't get sort of an agreement here, should move on. But just prepare some draft preliminary results of that. Hopefully you got this land use memo as well, which provides this 15 pages of detail, 17 pages. And we can certainly go to the memo too, tonight or next time that we meet. Question related. Introduce myself, more in depth. Last time we met when we were doing 5 admin update. Just as a reminder, you might be thinking to yourself, but didn't we just already do this? But that was just really to help folks through some of the legal elements that they were concerned with from the previous study. During that, we just sort of clarified some land use assumptions and added years of estimated years of construction of those capital plans. Just kind of more statutes. But for this sort of broader study, we go through all sort of those assumptions and those every single do CIPs and fee schedules for that matter too. One thing that Jeff didn't hit on is these sort of final reports called the nexus study, because we have to sort of provide that nexus between growth and capital plan. We do that by showing need, benefit, and proportionality. So we need to show that you're growing at a good clip and there's growth related infrastructure expansion, and a CIP that has that, basically showing the need, like impact fees to gather that growth related revenue. Benefits, that's in that time element. So there's 8 years or 11 years of extraordinary circumstances, but not every community, grows at a good clip to get enough dollars paying. So if you're only growing at 4 homes a year, a new park is gonna cost you $2 million, right? But there's no way that you're gonna gather that $2 million. And so sometimes there's not enough, growth occurring by the benefit, within that 8-year mark. So those cases, not to impact people, right? Because there's this agreement in place, this legal sort of binding agreement that dollars are being collected on growth, the city's gonna expand infrastructure. And the fee's proportionate. So one thing you're gonna see is recommendations to sort of make sure we at least have single family, multifamily, your fee schedule, because people from single family homes, less people from multifamily unit apartment, their visitation parks are gonna be greater. To that. Same thing on the commercial side, expanding this out to at least have retail, office, industrial, institutional care. Because warehousing is different than a shopping mall, which is different than a coffee shop, and so we want to make sure that the impact fees are proportionate to those demands and related service.
Colin, with regards to, let's just say a clinic, would you put that under institutional? So
Yeah.
just, so as an eye doctor, an ear doctor or whatever, those would all be
Yeah,
institutional.
exactly. Yeah, and so public schools, taxing districts, school districts would not be assessed that fee, but a private school, or preschool staff, could be assessed.
As a private entity.
Yeah. And they're similar to office, but it's just, that healthcare clinic, that hospital is a little different than a shopping mall, which is a little bit different than an office, right? And so.
Right. I appreciate you clarifying that. It's like, where does it exactly fit into the?
Yeah. And we'll provide some definitions too. So, a little in the weeds, but we rely a lot on institution of transportation engineers, longstanding sort of institution that does traffic surveys, but they also have this big traffic manual, trip manual, and it has maybe like 200 land uses in there with their own sort of engineered definitions. And so we sort of rely.
So I know you said public schools have their own tax districts and stuff, so these are, but charters. Do charters fall underneath the same thing?
Well, it'd be like taxing jurisdiction, so they don't collect.
Well, there's, yeah. Or by an authorized public charter school, they
Oh.
managed to log that in there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I remember
Squeeze
like
in
that. Oh, yeah.
Big paragraph.
None of this is by accident.
And it's sort of pseudo. I mean, they're through, I guess, state. We've talked about this before, and I think I probably told you guys this, but we're thinking new facilities that add capacity to the system, can't make up current deficiencies, so that sort of levels of service, sort of for maintenance kind of thing. Even sometimes like safety related on roadways aren't impact fee eligible because that safety issue exists today. It existed 10 years ago, right? That sort of turn or something. So you're gonna see some safety items, the CIP that find that impact fee. You can use impact fees to pay off debt for facility that's been oversized, and so say there's fire station that they oversize, right? They build it for 20 years worth of growth. It will secure a bond. A portion of that station is related to future development, so we can impact fees to help service that debt. Got some examples here. One other one that you're going to see is replacing of an existing facility or sort of public facility asset might be partially funded, and so 400 square foot playground to 1,000, right? We've sort of added capacity, terminology, right? Of 60%, so 60%. Let's see, what else? Yeah, I think Jeff mentioned all of this. Another thing, sort of on the admin side, these dollars are kept in separate revenue funds, so they're kept separate from their general fund. And so you're going to see a street impact fee fund, the park impact fee fund, the police impact fee fund, or impact fee fund, to ensure that those dollars don't get intermingled with those general dollars, right? Because, as you can tell, very strict parameters and uses of this revenue. But also it then sort of dovetail into the monitoring report. So this sort of financial one pager that shows dollars coming in and then.
Yeah, and you see those treasurer's reports in the annual reports as well, and monthly now. So.
Advisory committee, did a good job of kind of detailing your role, but really every single sort of aspect of this report, we're just trying to gather some input. You guys have sort of your ear to the ground growth, but also costs. You're also sort of members of the community, so you understand sort of potential needs of different departments. What you also do is the studies typically show this maximum support. Say, okay, all the sort of numbers we've crunched, the needs by the departments, the growth, the credits that we include, shows us X amount of dollars, an increase that might, but hypothetically double where you're at today. Input from the committee would be, hey, we agree on the validity of the study, but we would recommend the council adopting 70% of that maximum phase over a certain period of time to get to that percent, because we don't want cycle growth. And certainly for development that's occurring, big jump. That big jump might have not been included in those pro formas. It might hurt those hands. Other things for you guys is input on the 10-year or in 20-year growth assumptions, service areas, if you think those are needed. Probably not, just from sort of my experience, but those service areas would potentially sort of slice the city into two halves, let's say. Dollars collected in the northern half or the eastern half would be spent in that area for a specific eastern CIP, and in the west, same thing as well. The reason why I say, probably not is just for the most part, like a fire station going to be providing service or benefit to everyone in town. Same with like expansion of the police facility. Typically with roads, we're talking like big arterial roadways that everyone's using for the part. And then parks, maybe you'll see parks, Boise, bigger city, but they have 5 or 6 or 7 surface areas in their park impact fee. And so like North Boise has their own park impact fee, their own CIP. Southeast Boise has one. West Bench. Similar, but it ensures that the dollars being collected in the North Boise area that are going to neighborhood parks in that area are providing benefit to it. The reason why you create those service areas is you want to make sure that the CIP, the projects that you're funding, are benefiting everyone in the service area. If you have a citywide service area, someone builds a new home in the south, but all the dollars are collected and spent, or all the dollars have been spent in the north, might not be benefiting the people in the field.
One of our client cities about 12 years ago asked a famous countywide highway district, what would you say you did with the money you collected for impact fees in the city limits in terms of improvements in the city? And they're like, I don't know, do a public records request. And anyway, that's when I found that provision that requires the governmental entity to show an accounting on the spot, or at least annually. what I collected, where I collected it for, what it was supposed to go for, and what I did for my project.
Usually it's the broader, the larger geography, you know, the county. You know,
Oh,
yeah.
sounds familiar.
Right, yeah. Especially if there's high growth areas, yeah, you just want to make sure that your capital plans are actually perfect. Capital plans, you know, more specifically like priorities for those projects. We're gonna have a list of 7 park projects, by dates, and be able to provide some input there, how those should line up. Cost estimates, again, if you guys have a pretty good understanding of land costs, cost of construction, provide at least sort of reasonable estimates on what those costs might be. Growth share, again, in that the sort of deficiency item, replacing an existing bathroom that need, you know, that's to install or not functional, right? That's a deficiency, right? We should have these to fix those two stalls that don't work. Revising the fee schedule. So one thing I'm going to show you here is, along with potentially doing just single family, multifamily, splitting that out, we're seeing this more common of doing by the square footage of the home. And so as the home grows, using local census data, we can show that there's more people in those larger homes. 2-bedroom homes probably has people in. And so there's going to be more vehicle trips up the 4-bedroom home. So instead of doing it by type of homes, just all single family, no matter the size, breaking that out.
And will that
Yeah.
only be at new construction? What if somebody comes in later and wants to do an addition, and now I'm gonna add, 2 more bedrooms? How do impact fees
That's a
apply
great
at that
question.
time?
So I would say it's sort of a policy discussion, policy item, but some cities do that. So the argument is you have a 1,500 square foot home. Either you add it on or you bulldoze it. It's a 4,000 square foot home. Through even the figures we'll have, you can see that the service units increase. So the consumption of a public facility increases. For the most part, I don't think most communities do that. They just do it on new construction, but we see it that this sort of methodology applied that are seeing a lot of redevelopment and infill. That it was sort of like landlocked. There's growth happening, and it's more so just like bulldozing. Sort of those small sort of bungalows going into like big sort of homes, and they know that there's more people in those homes, and so they go by the square footage and basically charge the net difference. So okay, what would the fee be for a 1,500 square foot home? What would be the fee for the 4,000 square foot home? That's what we're going to charge them.
Difference.
Difference there, yeah.
I had a worksheet on that once when we were using tax revenue. And then guiding this is the definition of development, that which creates additional demand and need for public facilities. And then that other definition of redevelopment that creates an increase in service units.
Yeah.
So
And similar, I mean, more common would be commercial space redeveloping into a higher impact land use. So you have a warehouse that turned into a right.
Right.
What was 2 trips per day because of the 2 employees that are there, now we're generating 50 trips per day. You can charge a fee. It's less common, but cities do that, especially those that are trying to generate possible. Another reason to do that square footage approach is we've seen this becoming more common just because of housing affordability being an issue and sort of missing middle of homes being hard to build because of all these cost factors, right? And so to charge the same fee for 1,200 square foot or but sort of starter home compared to that 5,000 square foot home just doesn't, for communities that are trying to find equity and fairness and that might go that direction. And so I'll show you those numbers, especially as we sort of progress what those fee schedules would look like. Just to kind of give you a sense that might be eventually a recommendation that the committee on, if you single family, multifamily, or if you want to provide the size of the home. Same with the commercial side of things. We're going to start with those four, but if you think you should expand that a little bit more, be more specific. Input on sort of the committee's feel of the burden of what this max is. We're not there yet, but just sort of along with. And then the effort's goal, right, is to secure that recommendation authority. This, and then any other recommendations as well. A little bit more about methodologies, and so we can look backwards, called cost recovery. So we oversized the facility and issued debt. We can use impact fees to do that. Another kind of more sort of creative way of seeing this cost recovery is fire districts and fire departments do this a lot, is especially if they don't have impact fees yet, but they're just sort of implementing it. They might buy a fire engine, like as we're doing the study. But because they know it takes 3 years to get that fire engine built. How the world is now. They can upfront that purchase with general fund dollars, and then start collecting impact fees and use the impact fees to fund general fund for that purchase. So not just necessarily bond and debt, but kind of that inter-fund thing. Really important in those cases that we're very specific on the accounting of receipt dollars from an impact fee fund to the general fund, that it's abundantly clear that this is the reason. Incremental expansion is a very common one that essentially looks at your current level of service. So for parks, it might be 5 acres per 1,000. That's set the fees that 5 acres per 1,000. And as we grow, we're just going to collect the dollars based on that growth and then expand our parks incrementally as so that growth comes in. Plan-based is future looking. We have a capital improvement plan, has a growth share to it, and we're committed to this plan along with the non-impact fee revenue. And this is the big sort of hook with the plan-based approaches. If you have this capital plan that's $5 million and $3 million is impact fee eligible, that's great. We collect that 3, but you got to, if this city council's committing themselves to finding 2 on that plan, because that's what you're charging for. The moment that you start charge that fee on one home, committed yourself to that point. Credits, and so we've talked about this a little bit, but with impact fees, you want to ensure that you're not double charging growth or overcharging growth. And so double charging would be if, and this is usually uncommon in Idaho, but if there's other dedicated revenues going to your capital plans that the new homeowner is paying, you want to reduce the credit portion. So in a sense, if there's a property tax or sales tax going to that new park, and that future homeowner is going to be paying the sales tax or property tax going to that new park, but also an impact fee, you should reduce the impact fee, their portion of the sales tax that they're going to pay to make sure you're only collecting for like one full time, not double charging. And then also that if there's other like grants specifically coming in that are service that are going to fund those capital plans, if a $5 million plan, 3 of which is growth related, but the city secured a $2 million federal grant for roadway project or park project, we should only be collecting for that $1 million. That's just like the remaining difference. When we're updating these, it's important to consider the other sort of influencing factors. So cost of construction has really gone up in the last 4 or 5 years for new fire stations, for new lease expansion, for land and mountain home. And as those sort of costs to serve go up, so does typically the impact fee, right? Levels of service, that's important. And big investments, let's say, elevated our levels of service, impact fees might go up. Typically, this is not the case, but if levels of service have gone down, follow that too. Capital plans, so maybe, a good example actually would have been in 2021, the road plan had a road that was going out into the county that was removed a couple years later. That road was like $5 million, right? And so they scratched that off, and the street fee went down quite a bit because of that. So that the capital plans play a sort of intricate role in what that final fee amount is. So if we don't have huge capital plans because of limitations, the fees match that as well. And one thing that comes up a lot, which you might hear with police, so we started talking with the departments as well. The police have a need for a lot more FT, more officers. It's just really hard for them to hire more officers here. So in those cases, we have a police station, right? That's been sized for, 30 FTE, but we only have 20 FTE. Even if we grow, there's capacity in that system, right? That up until we get to 30, do we need to expand our facility? And there might be operating budget constraints related to that too. And that's sort of a consideration. Went through this with Jeff a little bit, but we're sort of at the onset of this, and sort of started collecting that data, growth-related data, facility information, start going through those methodologies, the credits, and finalize those CIPs, calculate the fees, present that to you guys, give your review and input, and then go to City Council. You guys have seen this before, but you have 4 different categories that the city's collecting for right now: police, fire, parks and streets. That totals for single family home brand. Police side is collecting for stations expansion of vehicles. Fires is the station apparatus like fire engines and equipment. Collecting for park amenities and rec centers, road widenings, and so for the most part, you can see on the commercial side, every new commercial is paying the same fee, no matter the type.
Do you help me understand why a multifamily has less in parks than a single family?
Yeah, so that's per unit, apartment unit. And so if you build a 10-unit building, you pay 10x. Yeah. And there could be cases, maybe it's here, like one multifamily development might be near, like adjacent to a park, and so we're going to set up more, help further down, but on average, the use of the park system is going to be less. For the most part, that's not always the case. Multifamily place, especially where there's just like a housing crunch, there's actually 4 or about the same amount of people in an apartment. In case the fees about the same. I think Jeff is going to hate these next ones, but here are.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Don't look.
Next slide.
Right, exactly. But gray line is where Mountain Home is currently. Just keep in mind, right, that as actually the caveat, I think really important to understand is the capital plans and construction costs, levels of service all play a role. We're not, to be pretty clear, we're not just picking a number out of the air here. So, funny enough, for police, that's on the left-hand side, so that's just police by single family unit. Mountain Home, fire impact fees kind of exactly in the middle. Parks, right? Boise's that average, right? So they have 6, that's the average. Stations there, but Highway District 4, part of ACHD.
Slides out here.
Right. Yeah. Any questions? I only actually have, maybe like 6 or 7 more slides for the graph growth projection. Some numbers with you. Any questions on stuff I just showed? Okay, so in 2021, wanted to just sort of give a refresher of what the growth rates were then. And I think the next slide I have is what happened in the last 4 years. And it was Ann Westcott who was with, we're sort of putting these together. And I spoke to her. She retired, but she was sort of going back and forth with the committee. So just wanted to sort of bring this forward, start having that conversation. So that 4% growth rate for population annually in non-residential floor area, so square footage, we're doing about 250 homes feet of commercial annually. And you can see here what would actually occur issuance for single family and multifamily in the top there over the last 5 years. So projected to be 250 homes and it being about half that and half that growth rate. And then on the commercial side, just about the half, well, actually less than half. You're seeing that breakdown. Last 3 years. I think what was happening in 2021, especially, is the whole state was at this sort of spike. So a lot of, we're updating all of them now. A lot of the growth rates were a lot. Rates for longer, costs really accelerated, and we grew, but just not at that right as peak. If we on the residential growth projections here, this is what you're seeing here. If we continue that 5-year trend of getting a growth rate annualized 6%, the current population estimated amount would be 17,500. That would bring about 3,360 homes based on the number of people per home. We would increase. Pushing if that trend continued, we would increase by 35%. And again, that this is probably one of the first times that you guys have seen this. If you have this memo, but
I think it's a lot more accurate than the 4% by far, correct? So,
I don't know, a lot of the growth push that we have here is from the base because of what they want for their airmen, and especially since they're bringing in the guitars and they're pushing a lot of their airmen out. And I know that the base has talked to development here for the growth and at least getting more residential involved as well. So, I mean, as just Mountain Home, the city, I think truly believe that the base is what pushes the developmental growth for Mountain Home, because ultimately we're an agriculture town. Okay, we're still a farming town.
So when you think of the fact that like one development going up and go road to Alquest, and just thinking out loud, it's commute from Boise to Mountain Home this way than it would be Boise. How do we deal with those kind of irregular spikes like that?
right,
But you also have Mayfield.
yeah. So the Simcoe, like the industrial stuff happening there. Well, that's interesting. I mean, like what I've heard with Mayfield though, at least is, they're like 13 minutes. Okay? And so less traffic way out makes that sort of state really congested. I think all those folks are still going to do their shopping. Now, employment wise, that's good. Or, the closer you get zip code, and maybe some of that is already sort of showing in these trend lines for new homes. I mean, that 21, 22, actually there was only two. Middle, but they're probably responding to.
And the only reason I ask, because you look at the median price of like Star, Cuna, Fair Mount Home, even though it's higher for the locals, but still, you have someone coming out of state, it's still more to 20 than that.
Yeah.
So one thing, and this is the only way this impinges on legal is we continually get questioned about the validity of the growth projections. And so one thing to keep in mind that I've asked Brenda and I've asked Colin, and I would like you guys to think about, because it's ultimately your input in this and your consultation and coordination with the planner, is the fact that we had the spikes in 23 and 4 and 2, actually, a little downturn, but this boom in building here. Some of it came, well, I think a lot of it came from Boise. So Boise put pressure on us. But a lot of those folks are now going to be able to, with Mayfield, remigrate. And so the assumption that Elmore County is making that the Mayfield is a net gain inside Elmore is perhaps off a bit. I don't know. I'm not, you're the expert. You folks are the expert, but there's some people that could say, oh, now I don't have to drive as far. So you had people migrate out to the new subdivision outside of town. They moved from Mountain Home into Purple Sage, right? They just crossed boundaries. And I suspect there's some, I don't know if it's knowable, but there's some quantifiable number of people that are gonna be like, I don't have to drive as far. I'm gonna go clear back to Boise, but I'm gonna hop on that new thing. So we'll have a loss here and then a gain in the county. I don't know what to make of it, but just keep that in mind. I think there's a non-zero number of people that are gonna do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you can see this trend. So, you know, we were less than 100 to then, 150 last year. Now, a lot of those spikes come with those multifamily. We've had actually increase with single family. So,
We're 30 building permits over where we were last year at this.
The ACS, though, it's only every 10 years.
the census, yeah. Well,
It's now like, yeah, conference level, maybe 90% on the
yeah,
stats ad.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Jeff said, it's kind of a, I'm not saying gamble, but it's almost like educated guess of, okay,
It is, yeah.
oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, I mean, if I knew how to precisely guess how many homes, over the next 10 years, I'd have your own business.
It's in here,
Right, yeah.
we'd ask Jeff for pizza.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's 4%. I mean, cities do grow at that rate, but every year, we're talking very different at that rate. 1.6. And one thing I should mention too is I believe we've talked about you guys during your annual meeting these growth the actuals that come in every year, and if it's off, from a margin of error of 10% or something, then we can actually press the capital collecting either.
I think 1.6 is a good baseline, starting where we're at, knowing that 4% was way too high, but I think it's a good baseline that we can adjust even in 6 months,
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I mean, the thing too is, I don't know, 7 years, but the big master plan, it's like similar thing out of South Boise cover now. Sometimes they're just pipe dreams, right? Or they make moves and then they stall. Have a more.
Well, I think Mayfield Springs is kind of the same deal because like 10 years ago, it was real hot and heavy and then it kind of cooled off and everything. But now with like the growth that's going on at Micron and everything, I mean, the past 3 or 4 years, it's been going like gangbusters, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. And like maybe in 21, maybe there was whispers of that, but yes, micron too fast.
Right.
And maybe funding, finance falls with Mayfield and the market and maybe the growth spikes here, right? Because there, and that would be that jacket. Well,
Right. And I will say, like, the past 3 to 4 years, I commute to Boise, every day. And now on the interstate, I bet you it's almost an even split of E plates versus 2C and 1A plates. So I think what has happened a lot here was, we got people that couldn't afford to live in Ada County and Canyon County because of the average home rates were getting so astronomical that those people got pushed out, because Boise was so expensive. Then it started to go to, you know, Meridian and then, Nampa, Caldwell and everything. And then in order for them to still afford to live, they've moved here because there's always been that geographical buffer, between us and Boise.
Yeah, that, as I was driving out here, there's a new sign. This might be but it said, the Treasure Valley going in another direction. So they're,
Yeah.
they're saying, Treasure Valley is going out, that's right. And Elmore County is just joined Compass planning organization
Yeah.
of Southwest Idaho, which was, for the most part, just Canyon County and Ada County. So just to start talks of bus system.
Do we have any concern for if, we've been collecting at 4% and then the actual is 1.6? Is there any concern with
Not
that?
really, because the capital plans would have been scaled at the four, like with the departments, right?
Yes.
But that would have been a higher CIP compared to a higher growth rate, and they did a plan base. You guys did a plan base. High number, but divided by a high number, and this sort of cost per unit, which reflects that. And so you haven't grown as much, but the CIP will be adjusted down, but adjusted down proportionally, most part, if that makes sense. And unless there was like a huge big ticket item in there, which there wasn't, so that, cover could grow by 10,000 people. And so the CIPs scaled that way. And then if there was actuals came in less, CIP would just scale back.
So one question I had on that is, if the growth rate didn't match what the projection was, would you then come back and adjust the beginning and completion date of that thing to match? So you would scooch it out.
Yeah, exactly.
further.
Yeah, more, yeah. So like you would have had, let's say, 8 part project based on a 4. Come in at 2, well, the dollars are following that, the revenue of that. So we're completing 7 to be able to complete. That sort of follows. And it's double, but sort of the magnitudes actually aren't that. We're still talking maybe 50 homes. That's not huge scale compared to parking structure. So there's still a difference there for sure, but if you bring it down to less neat. Now, if there was like 3 fire stations, that's based on a growth rate, and we don't grow, like, grow at 0.5%. We've been collecting for 3 and not gonna get there. And we're also collecting so little that we're not even gonna do 1 fire station. There might be an issue there.
Do the impact fees though that we charge adjust according to the growth rate?
They will, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah. It'll be the growth rate, but then, you know,
So people in the past, I mean, at 4% were charged more. Or
maybe not. Well,
maybe
because-
not?
Yeah, because.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, it'll be scaled because what we'll do, you know, there's a tentative sort of consensus on this is we bring this to the parks. And they'll, oh, okay, well, instead of that 4. So 10 projects is now. So that you're solving, the sort of the number that you're solving for is gonna be a lot less than. So it kind of goes back and forth. It really, it differs. You know, there's also, you know, crucial point here is costs of any new infrastructure has really increased. So you might even have slower growth rates or smaller needs project wise, cost of a project. That could be really, that has been a variance. Studies of, you know, were adopted in 20.
Have that in, will that be in the study, for research, or like what is the cost? Is that what the parks and?
Oh, yeah,
police and
yeah.
Those guys do that homework,
Yeah,
and then that's what they do.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. And you know, I think it's, what we've heard sometimes is, especially on the fire station side of things, is that, because those costs have really gone up, especially like Ada County, is there's been not necessarily pushback, but just questioning, okay, are you really needing to build a fire station at $800 per square? Because now, you know, fires right now, and they realize, well, to be a good steward of taxpayer money, we're not going to build to the standard. We're going to build sort of, you know, the stick build of, you know, a building that is still very usable. It's just lower standard.
Travertine everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and so there's, yeah, all that. I mean, there's a lot of.
So with that being said, as CUNA, right, CUNA and Nampa are looking to combine. So how does that exactly work?
From an impact fee perspective.
Yeah,
So they will, if they combine into what is we were talking about, because I was doing the sort of fiscal stuff to it, like American Eagle Fire District or something.
you're right.
They'll have to redo their CIP. Because CIP right now
Is this the fire districts are
Yeah.
gonna,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's public knowledge now. Yeah, we had it.
Right.
Yeah.
I've just seen it on the news, right? So where they're trying to combine to, because they're having problems, you know, building a new fire station for, say, Nampa and so they're trying to combine their
Yeah.
resources and everything to make it work. But how does that work where you're dealing with like 2 separate counties and everything on that? So,
Well, the county, yeah, that won't matter too, well, I mean, it'll just be multiple counties collecting for that sort of joint now, which is the case already for
but how does that affect the,
the impact fees.
yeah, the past impact fees
Oh,
or,
yeah. Well, then what you'll see, so when we think about impact fees is there's like these different components. So like for fire station, there's like if you get into the weeds, there's sort of a piece that's associated with fire station costs, a piece of apparatus and
Mhm.
for equipment. And so the people that built in CUNA are paying for X, Y, and CUNA, and people in Napa, X, Y, and like station, apparatus, equipment. And so when they combine, they'll have, these three pots that are like, of those three, because it's still going to station expansion. Still go to, theoretically, or, I mean, what we showed is that, there will be cost savings, that capital plan be for the two training sites. Now,
Right, and you have less
yeah, you could, yeah, instead of.
captains or what, you know,
Exactly, like two stations, a mile from the boundary, because their rating can now be one station. So, it's gonna be becoming more common, because it's very, very rare, fire districts to consolidate, but the state legislation last year, put in a copy, like, it edited some of the language of consolidation, their property tax and that stuff.
So-
Two parts were before.
There's a consolidation, you preserve the taxing base across the consolidation, two separate taxing districts. It's the annexation of a city, unincorporated land into a fire district that was subject to the infamous House Bill 389 cap of no more than 8% budget. So you were limited, so it wasn't financially feasible for a city to fold up its fire department, join a fire district, have the district annex it, because it couldn't capture all of the property tax to levy for the value of the city. That was the bill that was changed this year. Smack in the, anyway.
Can I pause real quick?
Yeah.
We're coming up to an hour and a half, and we still need to finish Mountain Home, so let's focus on. Mountain Home.
Well, so that, the growth rates, so that was population, that was employment growth. And so continuing, so that building permit trend that we were seeing, which was about 67,000 every year. A lot of that industrial, a ton of retail or office. We're projecting that for 10 years instead of the 4. So we have 4,500 job pay. It's going to be 670 employment. Most of that being industrial. Happening. This would be we're talking growth rates, but how will the city industrial or gonna see in fact, it's mostly industrial. This is even more. Instead of yeah. So that, yeah, I just, so, yeah, I already talked to this, the very common approach for impact fees is different housing types and to that. One way of scaling that is based on number of home, a single family home, 6 people. And so that would be definitely, at least my recommendation. That. And you kind of already have that with parks where that. The other way would be doing it by the square footage of the home. So we have local building data, local census data, and the figure right here, a number top left hand side, we can get these data points, right, of bedrooms in square feet, and that for one, there's 0 to 1 bedroom plus homes, then pin those data points on that line graph there, and then get this fitted line equation. And then we put in different size grouping, number of people. I've done and this is the 700 square feet less and then 800 more. That's just Boise. I'm just using home, but you can see how that those small homes, let's say a 1,200 square foot home, have 1.6 people. The largest homes, 8 people. We don't have to necessarily make that decision now, but
question I got. So what's the age of people working from home? So say we have a 4-bedroom house. Or we only have 3-bedroom house. It's built as, with closet and everything, really an office.
Yeah.
So how do you put that variable? You just kind of,
well, we've gone away for that's actually a great reason. Stay away from the bedroom count and do it
Okay.
by the size. And we used to, started, we used to do bedrooms, but, which could get kind of sly. Say, well, the third bedroom, doesn't have a door on it, so that's a den. It's actually a 2-bedroom fee, and then,
Put a door
they get
on
yeah,
that.
the door.
Yeah.
Right. And so it actually kind of seems more intuitive to do the bedroom, but traditionally, but you make a great point, is now you find 4 bedrooms, 2 of them. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, the square footage, it helps as well if you're, for communities that are trying to just encourage, again, that sort of missing middle is the term of those smaller single family. We're probably talking $1,000 here, so it's not, but if there's priorities. So, I mean, next steps is any sort of other sort of put on the growth assumption, residential fee. We haven't really sort of opened it up for any other sort of priorities the committee might have. Just as sort of this updates as sort of press. Other things as well is we're drafting those newest CIPs with department staff. Have that ready to go, draft form.
Are we the ones to get to suggest that we include wastewater?
You can. Yeah. I prepared, Jeff, tried to ask for like proposal for just the 4 that we're doing, 4 plus other water, wastewater. I guess council decided just with at least this effort. Wastewater is especially, it's really helpful. And I don't know where I haven't talked with about it, but if it's like mass facility plan for, and we have the engineers that have together sort of sharpened their pencils, and it's going to cost us $10 million. It's kind of complicated, but it's also even simpler because the engineers can like quantify any gallons or how that plant service, so we can the math that being simple. It's a $10 million project. It's going to generate a capacity increase of 10 million gallons. So it's just $1 a gallon, and gallons a home uses every day, and that would be yeah. So I'm not really sure why, just why the city didn't move.
Right.
Sometimes, they're doing this in Boise. Is there's no wastewater impact fee. They increasing rates, big rates. So that ends up, everyone pitches in, but then those costs are spread out. Dollars for extended.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have to split it between improvement capacity.
Yeah, it gets tricky. The only successful lawsuit, Dave, I always say Southern North Idaho, Eden. In that case, they charging full freight wastewater, but also part of their utility rates. Double for that charging. They got sued, I'm sure. Say, hey, you're double. They paid it, had to return all the dollars to every single person paid it, but well, not even paid it, but it goes to the property. So people who didn't pay it actually got a check in the mail. But then there's like political fallout, and it's pretty tough. So the math ends up being kind of simple, but there's the sort of funding mechanism.
Right.
Yeah. The, yeah, the Nipsey case, also, there's 4 of them. Like, they had to go up to the Supreme Court and be remanded back. One point, it was the star of the show was the engineer who was supposed to have been allowed to present information to the court on the structure of the fee and what it was based upon. And that some portion of that fee was salvageable. That some portion of it was excess. So it was, you're charging, and it was based on, I think I was talking about this at the last meeting, the connection buying into the existing system, and then the overhead part was for expansion, and that was impermissible. But what the court found was that they could justify some portion of the higher amount of the fee because the increase in the value of the system and the increase in the replacement cost of the system. So as long as they could demonstrate those things, it salvaged part of the fee and reduced the amount that they had to they didn't invalidate the entire fee. So that's an important distinction there. But with wastewater, I think the city council didn't go with
That's
doing
correct.
it this time.
They did give us well, last Colin mentioned, they gave us a that included water and wastewater as part of the package. And they chose just to go with the parks, streets, police and fire.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was that to amend the 2025?
No.
That was for
That was for this
2020
proposal.
For this one here? Oh, okay.
But all is not lost with the ability to pay for expansion of those things. So that menu of options that I showed you at the beginning of my presentation are routes that you could take to increase that. So without having to use impact fees. Because remember the 8 and 11 years. So that's another thing you have to try to incorporate is we get this done in 11 years. And again, we're back in this iterative merry-go-round, right? You're going to set a fee, you're going to collect it, then you're going to watch and see what happens. Then you're going to see, are we getting closer to that? Or is the growth not keeping up with it? Oh, do we still need that project? So all the knobs, you're going to keep turning. And you might have a set of impact fees that last for 1 year. You may alter them again the next year. You may alter them again the next year. I don't know. So
Possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's last I had. Next time there'll be CIP's capital plans. Also feel free, I'm a lot more work.
Send me a copy of this.
You did. And,
Should have. it.
but
We
yeah,
can
as I
take
said,
that.
as we sort of
It's in the
progress
packet too.
through,
Okay.
really want to make sure that
Perfect. Okay, anything else? Okay, in that case, we are adjourned.
Good night's sleep.
surprisingly everyone.
Yeah.